Good day, welcome to our video on solving word problems involving percentages. Let's read our problem. There are 25 squares in a square grid. Sandy colors 40% of the squares red and 20% of the remaining squares yellow. She then colors the rest of the squares green. How many squares are colored green? This is a good example of making models to help you think about the problem. If you just draw a simple bar model and label it accordingly, we can then think and strategize on what operations and what values to solve for. As you can see, my bar is just a sketch. It's not pretty, it's not straight, but it has to make sense. So when I draw a line over here and write 40%, I'm thinking carefully that it must not be big enough to cover more than half of the bar. We can also label the whole bar so that we can see how many squares make up 100%, and this is 25 squares. We can label this part red and then put our focus on this part of the problem, which says 20% of the remaining squares are yellow. Now we can label the portion that shows 20% of the remaining squares as yellow. But we have to label it carefully because it talks about the remaining squares. So to be very accurate, we have to label it as 20% of 60% and then mark it properly. And that's yellow. And then we can now identify that this is what we are missing. If you look at it carefully, this part is red, this part is yellow, and this part is green. We easily understand what 40% means, but we may have to find what 20% of 60% actually represents. So to solve for the percentage of yellow squares, we can use 0.20 or the decimal value for 20% and multiply it to 60 to get 20% of 60%, and you will get 12. You can now change this value here to 12%, and that will give you an opportunity to solve for the percentage for green squares. So 100% minus 40% minus 12% will give us 48%. 48% is 0.48 in decimal form, and we can solve for 48% of 25 by multiplying 0.48 times 25, and you should get 12 green squares. Now, if we want to check if our answer is reasonable, we can always add the percentages we actually used. So 40 plus 12 plus 48 is actually 100, which gives us some confidence that our computations are accurate. If you want to be really sure, you can solve for the percentage of each one using these values. And that ends part 1 of our video on solving word problems involving percentage. I'll see you in the next one.